Chess is full of hidden tricks that can turn a losing game into a winning one, and most chess players struggle at finding chess tactics. In this video, we are going to explore all the important chess tactics that will help you to take control of the game. And if you aren't using these tactics, you are missing out some easy wins. So you should definitely learn them now, or you will risk losing to someone who already have learned these tactics. So let's move on to our first tactic. So our first tactic is the fork. A fork is a type of attack where you attack two or more pieces simultaneously and you are guaranteed to win material. Like look at this position. Here, white played knight to f5 check, forking the king and the queen. And after king g6, he is going to capture the queen and white is completely winning in this position. In chess, all the pieces can fork. This is an example of fork with a bishop. This is how you fork with a queen. This is how you fork with a rook. This is a fork with a pawn. And finally, this is a fork with a king. Next up, we have the pin. A pin occurs when a less valuable piece is attacked and it cannot move because the more valuable piece behind it will get captured. There are two types of pins, an absolute pin and a relative pin. When a piece is pinned to the king, then it's called an absolute pin and the piece in front of it cannot move. And when a piece of less value is pinned to a piece of a greater value, then it's called a relative pin. Like in this position, this knight is pinned to the queen, and if black tries to move his knight, then white will capture his queen and black will lose. So our next tactic is the skewer. A skewer occurs when a more valuable piece is in front of a less valuable piece, and when the more valuable piece is attacked, the less valuable piece behind it gets captured. In this position, white played rook to f2 check, and as you can see, black's king is forced to move away, and then white can take this queen and white is winning. So our next tactic is the discovered attack. A discovered attack occurs when moving a piece reveals a strong threat from a piece behind it. Like in this position, white can play bishop to a6, attacking the rook. And as you can see, when the bishop moves there, it also unleashes the rook and it's an attack on the queen as well. So after queen moves anywhere, white is going to take this rook and he's up in material. There are other forms of discovered attack like a discovered check. In this position, when white plays rook to e4, as you can see, it's a discovered check from the bishop and the queen is also under attack. So when the king moves, white is going to take this queen and he is winning. And there is another form of a discovered check, which is a double check. A double check occurs when two pieces checks an enemy king simultaneously. Like in this position, white can play knight to f6, double check. Now there's a key point to remember in double check. Whenever an enemy king is in double check, the king have to move. In this position, as you can see, this king have no legal moves, so he cannot move anywhere and it's a checkmate. Next up, we have the X-ray attack. An X-ray attack is an attack or a defense through an enemy piece. Like in this position, white can play knight takes b7, and as you can see, this bishop is defending through the enemy piece. So after bishop takes, white can simply recapture and is up a pawn. Now let me show you one more example. In this position, white can play queen to e8 check. Now this king have no legal moves, and as you can see, this rook is defending the queen through this enemy rook. So after rook takes, white will simply recapture and it's a checkmate. Now let's look at another interesting tactic, which is the Zugzwang. A Zugzwang occurs when it's your turn to move and all your moves are bad. Like in this position, white can play rook to c8 check, and after bishop blocks, white can play this waiting move, rook to a8. And now this king have only one legal move, which is king h8. Then white can play rook takes f8 and it's a checkmate. Next up, we have the Zwitschenzug. A Zwitschenzug is an intermediate move, usually a check capture or an attack for gaining a tempo. Like look at it this position. Here, your queen is under attack and black's queen is also under attack. So if you capture his queen, he is going to capture your queen and the position is quite equal. But here, before capturing this queen, white can play an intermediate move with queen to e6 check. Now, no matter what he does, now you can safely capture this queen and you are winning. Let's move on to our next tactic, which is Desparado. Desparado is a type of Zug where you sacrifice an attacking piece before you capture other. Like for example, in this position, if you play rook takes queen, then he is going to take your queen and the position is quite equal. But here, instead of capturing this queen, you can play queen takes f8, sacrificing the queen, and after he takes, you can take this queen, and now as you can see, white is clearly up a rook and completely winning. Next up, we have the deflection tactic. Deflection means deflecting an enemy piece from an important square. For example, in this position, white can play this amazing bishop takes h7. Now, the king is forced to take, and as you can see, this king was deflected away from the defense of the rook, so white can play rook takes rook and he's up a rook and winning. Next up, we have the decoy tactic. It is also known as attraction. In this tactic, we attract an enemy piece to a certain square. Like for example, as you can see, if black's king was here, then white can play knight to f6 check, forking the king and the queen. So he can play rook to g8 check, and now this king is attracted to the g8 square, but then knight to f6 check is a fork, and after king moves, white will take this queen and he is winning. Let's move on to our next tactic. So our next tactic is overloading. Overloading is when a single piece is assigned to protect multiple pieces, squares or threads. Like for example, in this position, as you can see, this pawn is defending the bishop and it's also defending the knight. But here, white can simply play knight takes bishop. And after pawn takes knight, this knight becomes undefended. So here, white can just take this knight and white is winning. Next up, we have the interference. Interference means obstructing the connection between two enemy pieces. For example, in this position, black can play knight to e4 check. And as you can see, this rook and queen are disconnected. So after king moves anywhere, black is going to capture this rook and black is winning. Next up, we have undermining. It is sometimes also called removing a defender. It generally means capturing a key defender to win material or checkmate the opponent. Like for example, in this position, black's knight was defending this rook, so white can play this amazing rook takes knight, and after king takes, this rook becomes undefended, so white is going to capture this rook and he is up a bishop and completely winning. Let's move on to our next tactic. So our next tactic is quiet move. Quiet moves are non-threatening moves that improves the position. Like for example here, white plays rook to g8, and as you can see, it doesn't create any threat, but it improves the position because black's king cannot enter this file and this pawn is unstoppable. Even though he tries to b1 check, just white is going to move his king to the h2 square and white is winning. Next up, we have the windmill tactic. Windmill is a forced sequence of discovered attacks which allows a piece to go on a complete rampage, gaining huge material advantage. For example, in this game, white plays bishop to f6, sacrificing his queen, and after black takes, white plays rook takes g7 check, king h8 only move, and now white just completely destroyed black by first playing rook takes f7 check, king moves, then comes rook g7 check. Again, he goes king h8, then rook takes bishop is a discovered check, king comes back, then rook g7 check, and after king h8, now he played rook to g5 check, and after king moves, this rook takes h5 and black resigned because white is just up in material and completely winning. Now let's see our next tactic, which is under promotion. Under promotion means promoting a pawn to a piece other than a queen. For example, in this position, white plays rook to f8 check, and after rook takes, he plays queen to h7 check, and after king takes, and in this position, instead of promoting to a queen, white under promotes to a knight, which is a fork, and after king moves, white is going to take the queen and is completely winning. Let's move on to our next tactic. So our next tactic is perpetual check. A perpetual check is a situation where you can check an enemy king forever and he cannot escape. When a perpetual check occurs, either the game is drawn by threefold repetition or players agree to a draw. Like for example, in this position, white is down a queen, so he played knight to a6 check, and after king moves, this knight takes c7 check. He comes back, and as you can see, white can repeat the sequence by playing knight a6 check, king e8, and the game ends in a draw by threefold repetition. Next up, we have forcing a stalemate tactic. Whenever you are having a bad position or you are down in material, finding a forced stalemate could help you save the game. Like for example, in this position, as you can see, white is just up by a rook, bishop and a pawn. But there is something else to be noticed. As you can see, this black king have no legal moves and black's pawn is also blocked. So here, black can play this amazing queen takes h2, sacrificing the queen. Now he is forced to take, but then black have no legal moves, so the game ends in a draw by stalemate. Next up, we have one of the most important tactic, which is sacrifice. A sacrifice in chess means giving away a piece in order to gain an attack, material, or even checkmate your opponent. Generally, there are three types of sacrifices: a piece sacrifice, generally a queen or a rook, or an exchange sacrifice, and a clearance sacrifice. Let's cover them one by one. First, let's look at a piece sacrifice. In this position, as you can see, white is offering a trade of queens, and if he doesn't take, he will capture your knight. But here, you can play this amazing queen takes h2, sacrificing the queen. Now, king is forced to take, but then this rook to h6, checkmate. Next up, we have the exchange sacrifice. It generally means sacrificing a rook for a minor piece like a knight or a bishop. As you can see, this knight is defending this checkmate, so black can play this amazing rook takes e1, and after rook takes, which is forced, now no one defends the g2 square, so black can play queen takes g2, checkmate. Next up, we have the clearance sacrifice. Clearance sacrifice means clearing a certain square by sacrificing a piece. For example, in this position, white played queen takes g5. The idea behind this move is to clear this f5 square for the knight, and after knight takes, this knight to f5 check. He goes king to g6 and then h5 is a checkmate. Let's move on to our next tactic. So our next tactic is exposing hanging pieces. Hanging pieces are generally undefended pieces, or you can find a way to remove the defender. For example, in this position, black plays this stunning e3, and now, as you can see, this bishop is defending the c3 knight and the g5 knight. So if he plays f takes e5, then this knight becomes undefended, so black is going to take this knight. And if he tries to play bishop takes e3, then this knight becomes undefended, so he can take this knight and black will win material. Next up, we have trapping a piece. A trapped piece means a piece which generally have no safe square, and you can capture that piece to gain significant material advantage. Like for example, in this position, white can play this simple g5. And as you can see, this bishop is completely trapped, so he can do anything, but then white will take this bishop and he is having a material advantage. Next up, we have the counterattack. A counterattack in chess is an immediate response to an opponent's attack, creating counter threats. For example, here black is forking the rook and the queen. But here, instead of saving your queen, which what most players think of, but here instead you can play knight to d4, counter-attacking his queen. So if he takes your queen, you are going to take his queen. Now let's see some common checkmate patterns you should know. First, we have the ladder mate. You can checkmate your opponent when he have a king, you have a rook and a queen, or you have both rooks by following a simple pattern. First you will play rook to c4, and after king e5, there's queen to b5 check. As you can see, this king's squares are being limited. He goes king e6, then comes rook c6 check, and now you're going to keep following the same pattern. And after king moves to the final rank, there's rook to c8, checkmate. Now let's look at another popular mating pattern, which is the smothered mate. Here, white can play knight to f7 check, and after king g8, there's knight to h6, double check. If he plays king to f8, then queen to f7 is a checkmate. So he will play king to f8. But then white can play this amazing queen to g8, sacrificing this queen. And now since this queen was defended, so he's forced to take with the rook, but then knight to f7 is a smothered checkmate. Next up, we have the back rank checkmate. A back rank checkmate occurs when the enemy king is stuck behind his own pawns and he cannot move. Like for example here, white can simply play queen takes rook, and after knight takes, white can recapture this knight with the rook, and as you can see, this king is stuck behind his own pawns and it's a checkmate. Well, if you want to practice your tactics, then you can check out these chess puzzles. And if you want to learn some quick tactical patterns and sacrificing patterns, then you can check out this right playlist. And if you don't want to miss the upcoming videos, then don't forget to subscribe.